right. What did you specifically wanted to? What were you bringing up? What do we want to talk about?
Hey there. No, I was I just thought you maybe misunderstood his views on the dysphoria thing.
Okay.
Like why you might think that you might not have dysphoria as a trans person if you kind of understood his views. And maybe you do understand his views. I just wanted to maybe clarify in case you had.
All right. Go for it.
So I just think so he seems to think that the whole trans, and sorry, I'm a bit nervous being on stream and all that,
No,
so I'm
it's fine.
sure you understand. So if you think about the whole trans thing as being on a, so he thinks the gender construct should be abolished and that
Sure.
everybody falls on some sort of spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's trans to some extent. Some people are on one side, some people on the other side, some people in the middle, and everywhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if the gender constructs in society were gone, then I think the dysphoria would be gone with that in a way. Um, so he thinks that gender dysphoria is a result of the gender construct in society. If that makes sense.
Sure. But that wouldn't mean then that people who face dysphoria wouldn't, at least in today's society, that wouldn't mean that their dysphoria can just be talked away or whatever, or that gender affirming care wouldn't be effective treatment for them. But he argues against gender affirming care.
Sure. No, I'd agree with what you said there. In today's society, I agree. I think, yeah, I guess his point would just be that if the, if the gender construct was abolished, then he wouldn't say dysphoria exists at all because people would just be who they want to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it could exist realistically either. I mean, I agree with that point. That's what I was saying earlier when I a gender abolitionist, but I don't think you have to do all of this. And even from that perspective, I don't think that a lot of this makes sense. That doesn't explain why he doesn't believe in gender affirming care. Doesn't explain why he believes that if somebody's dysphoric about their gender, they can just learn to deal with it. That doesn't mean like any of these things, you know.
Right. So it's just we just have a different view. Well, we don't have a different view at all, I don't think. It's just the now and how he wants it to be, right? And it's like
Well, I mean,
I agree
sure.
totally with what you're saying with how it is now, but if things were how he wants them to be, then I guess I would understand all of those things. Why dysphoria would be gone,
Well,
why we wouldn't
sure.
need gender
That
affirming
that
care,
that would
all of
make
that sort of stuff.
that would make sense, but he's talking about his takes now. He's not talking about his takes in the future. So I don't think that really explains why his takes are his takes at the moment.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thought. 'Cause I've been thinking a lot about how he thinks of this whole thing, and it does seem like he just his take now is that it should be how he wants it to be, his perfect world. Like when it yeah, it's like the whole process of how to get there is kind of missing.
Yep.
And I totally agree with that. So I think we're clear. I just wanted to make sure you understood that.
Sure.
And I think you did.
Yep. All right.
Thanks, man.
Yep.
Appreciate the time.
You have a good one.
You as well. See ya.
Bye. Did you want to talk to me, Zonia?
Hey, hang on
Howdy.
one second here. It's very quiet for some reason.
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna turn it up. I'm turning myself up.
Okay. Yeah. Um, what's what I find to be a little interesting about this whole thing is like, in a way, like there's two things I wanted to comment on. One is that like Max's whole thing about control freak,
Yep.
right? And talking about that, he thinks that Supreme is a control freak, and that Supreme thinks he can, like what did he say earlier? Like can understands everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the problem that I see with Max's approach, or Mrgirl, as people know him, is that he he seems to like try to synthesize understanding by finding what he thinks is the most closely relatable thing to the person that he is talking with or talking about. And so, like when he was talking to me about dysphoria, he was trying to find things that he could relate to try and parallel the experience, and then tried to apply what he thought would be sort of like um, a strategy to address that issue that he was relating to, um, and like apply it to me and get me to try it out and see what happens. And I think what a major component of empathy is to actually be able to understand that you don't have the ability to understand that person, that individual person's experience. Like there are some things that if you try to synthesize the understanding, you're actually in a way you're being less empathetic and you're being
Yeah,
more controlling.
yeah, I know what you mean. I don't. So I'm just gonna be honest. The terms empathy and sympathy and stuff have so much baggage with how a lot of them are used in implications that I'll tend to not gravitate towards them. But I understand your what you are saying. I believe to be accurate. It's like I'll try and relate with somebody's experience to the best of my ability, but sometimes I can take it to a degree that might invalidate that person's experience because I'm trying to say that my experience is closer to theirs than it actually is a material reality. Like with the example of, feeling bad about your body. I don't think feeling bad about, like, my body, let's say, even because some would argue that a preference in and of itself is kind of feeling bad about your body in reference to what it could be. So, like, for instance, my preference would be to be 2 inches taller. It's not that big of a deal, right? For me. But my preference would be to be 2 inches taller. To relate this as comparable in nature and in the manner in which I feel like is done to people that not even necessarily face gender dysphoria, but any kind of, like, even strong aversion towards the way that they are or a strong attraction to the way that they could be, I think it's kind of doing it a disservice unless I've directly experienced that before and it's just, I'm in a state where it is like what it is now.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, and then with what the previous caller was saying, um, so I too am a gender abolitionist, and I don't actually think that it will solve all the problems of dysphoria, though. Like, I think that it may help with some people who have dysphoria, but there's still going to be the issue that if you're born
Uh-huh.
into a masculine body and you grow up, you see your parents and you see you see other bodies and you see the different shapes of them, both feminine and masculine, even if we don't have terms applied to them and we've completely abolished, the gender as that relates to that, you may still find that incongruence between the way your body is shaped and the way that of the other people in your related experience are shaped, right? So you may still have a form of gender dysphoria even if we've completely abolished gender.
Would we call it gender dysphoria? I know in principle
Yeah.
it's the same exact thing. Like in principle, it would be like pretty much the same thing, right? We see a group of people that
Yeah.
are treated a specific way on the basis of the way that they look, and that it essentially be the same thing. So like, but would we still call it gender dysphoria though?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But there would be some kind of incongruence that we would have to describe in one way or another.
Yeah.
What we would call it at that point, I don't know.
So would we? Do you think that this would? So yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. Obviously, there's going to be people that like want to be taller, or maybe want to more radically like want to have like let's say they don't naturally have breasts, they want to have breasts or something. Right, this is going to happen always, whether gender exists or not, because it's just people are going to view that as something they want. But
Yeah.
that's always going to happen. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think we are talking about in more of an idealized sense than anything else. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's where we were at with that. But yeah, I don't disagree with you.
Sunglasses cats. I go with any all pronouns, so I present feminine. So usually I say she, her, but I don't really care all that much.
Really,
Um,
any pronouns?
yeah, it's a recent thing I decided to do because I've had these experiences where people will quote misgender me, and then like
Mm-hmm.
other people will jump on that person and be like, "Why did you misgender her?"
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel really bad about it because honestly, I don't really care about being misgendered, and I keep
Mm-hmm.
trying to communicate it to friends, be like, hey, "It's not that big of a deal. I don't really care about being misgendered." and they just don't really get it. And I always feel bad when people get dogpiled when I get misgendered. So instead, I just decided to say, let's do any all, because I think it works fine for me. I don't really care all that much.
That's kind of sad that you're like looking at people that are like getting in trouble over that, and you're like, oh no, that doesn't feel good, and then you're like accommodating that. That's
Yeah, well, like I have a feminine expression, and if people misgender me, it's honestly like I've never really cared all that much. So
okay.
I do feel bad when people get dogpiled. It's more that just people, like, I think they also feel bad too if they misgender me,
Uh-huh.
and so I
Yeah.
prefer to just be like,
Yeah, it is what it is.
whatevs.
Yeah, it doesn't really help anything if they feel bad to be like, yeah, you know what, you're a piece of garbage too. Like, yeah, I definitely
Yeah,
get that.
so I switched to any all pronouns a couple months ago, especially after it happened to one individual. He was a young man. He was like 18 years old. He was new to the server that we were on,
Oof.
and the poor guy just like got dogpiled. I felt really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think Max has this sort of in a way, I do perceive Max as being more the control freak, because he does try to synthesize understanding through what he believes are the closest matching relatable experiences. And the problem is that it means that he ends up kind of like overstepping and doing something that is completely unempathetic. And like, for example, the whole blackface thing, and that's like the control freak does that kind of thing, or the person who wants, not the control freak, the person who is trying to control the situation does that kind of thing. The person who has
Can you
as
explain to me that, because I feel like we're gonna you're gonna get into another point if
yeah.
I don't know what the blackface thing is. Can you explain what happened there to the best of your ability?
Okay, so on the Stardust Chaos Cast last Saturday, I had a panel. I was on her panel, and Max was on the panel as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was the conversation veered into transracialism,
Yep.
and as that conversation evolved, Max related it to being transgender,
Mm-hmm.
and then uh, and then I jumped in at one point and I explained that, well, no, gender dysphoria though is very different. Not all transgender people have gender dysphoria, but gender dysphoria is, you can't. It's because he was explaining. I'm trying to remember how it came about, but he was explaining like it had to do with um, uh, was something that you could grow used to. And so he was explaining it as like he was using his like aging to be an example, that
Yeah.
as you age over time, he doesn't like the way that he looks,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't like the lines that he sees in his face. But then he talked about like over time you become familiar with these things and you become accommodated to the differences. And I was saying, well, that's not the case with dysphoria. Dysphoria is a little bit different from that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not something you just adapt to over time. And one thing I even left out that I should have mentioned is that over time, the more that you
Yeah.
avoid it, the stronger it
Yeah, it can get
becomes.
worse.
So I started relating my own dysphoric experiences with him, and then at some point he started bringing it back to transracialism, and then started saying, well, what if you had tried doing like blackface, and just seeing like head to toe blackface, and just seeing what that feels like, and whether or not your dysphoria goes away or is reduced. And it was a weird thing for him to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem that I see with like him claiming that Supreme is the control freak, I think that Supreme saying that he's more Zen, I think is more truthful than him being a control freak. And I think Max's position is more the controlling position, because Supreme is willing to say I don't understand, and Max is trying to shoehorn understanding. He's trying to find something that he thinks
Yeah.
is closely relatable, and then
Yeah.
shoehorn that into being, oh, this is my empathy for you. But it ends up being completely off kilter, and he ends up doing
Yeah,
something like,
it's. I mean, what he just said prior to you coming in here was that like he believes that reasonably, he would be able to understand like anybody's um, emotional position, and I think he is uncomfortable with, because I think I could agree with the idea that over time people can train themselves to like more or less. I don't want to use like empathy or sympathy here or whatever, right? They can like more or less understand the process that people are going through, in the sense that they can hear them out, logically build the arguments that they're making, and logically apply those arguments to new circumstances. Like, similar to like, I haven't faced gender dysphoria. I don't think I've faced any form of dysphoria actually at all. Maybe, but nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. But I haven't faced any form of dysphoria, but based on other people's accounting of consistent dysphoria that I've heard from multiple different sources about multiple different things, I can apply the logic of dysphoria to new circumstances in new environments and things like that. And I think that's like a process that you have to go through. It's not something that you intuitively understand, but it feels like Mrgirl here, generally speaking, believes or wants to believe that he can intuitively do it. And that with whatever circumstance it is, he's intuitively able to do that. Whereas, which I feel like people should be more comfortable with saying, yeah, I mean, I just don't know. Like, I don't know about those kinds of experiences, you know?
Well, I kind of see it as like the South Park N-word episode where Stan is running around like constantly telling Token, like, I understand what you're going through. I understand what it's like. And Token just storms off. And then, like, at the very end of the episode, Stan ended up saying, wait, I think I get it now. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And like that is in the way I see empathy. It's about having understanding what that other people have experiences that you can't always relate to. And so the more you can understand that, the better you can be an ear to that person's
Yeah,
experiences.
yeah.
And that to me is empathy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is true. That was the really big problem I had. I really don't like referring to my age, that I went through this process, because it makes it sound very demeaning to people who haven't gone through the process. But in the spirit of, remaining consistent, I'll just say, like, prior to me being 15, I was very much that way, where I was like, everybody's perspective I can understand, and I understand it so well that I've arisen above their perspective and recognized that their perspective is inferior to mine, and that their perspective can be overcome through similar manners that I have overcome certain problems in my experience. And the idea was essentially that somebody would come up to me with a problem, and I'd be like, hey, I experienced X, Y, and Z, whatever it be, like bigotry or something. And I'd be like, well, I've experienced something that I feel like is similar to this, and I don't believe that your experience is very divorced from mine, and therefore, like, you're a piece of shit. I was renowned for doing this, not only on an individual level, but vocally with my friends and other people when it came to depression. Right? I was like, anybody who's depressed was weak. They were weak-willed, right? Because I'd been sad, and that perspective, I got over that shit real quick. But then I actually got depressed, and that's when everything changed. I actually got depressed when I was 15, and then I realized people can have such a separate perspective than what I have, that it's literally like not even the same view of material reality to what I view. And then it changed my outlook on like how I view all emotions about all issues in totality. And so yeah, that's where I've arrived at in regards to that.
Yeah. It's well, honestly, your experience, I mean, you may have been more extreme with what direction that you went, but your experience honestly is like your typical, not typical, but oftentimes you get that to that certain point in your teens where you're like, you think you know everything, and
Yeah.
you think you know it better than everybody else, and that's a very common situation we all go through. And then we kind of get blasted by reality, and then next thing you know, we're like, oh shit, I don't actually know anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it's And I think it was appropriate to kind of avoid terms like empathy or sympathy because you're right, they are very loaded and very subjective. Um, but I
Mm-hmm.
think when it comes down to what Max is saying,
Yeah.
you have to he is really being controlling in this and instead needs to kind of let go the way that Supreme is talking about and kind of be able to accept that actually no, there are certain things that I don't quite have the ability to understand. I can try to understand certain components of it as much as possible, but to assume that I actually have the ability to fully understand is folly, and that's controlling, and that's creating these kinds of issues where you can't actually where you hit a wall and you try and relate to a
Yeah.
person
I
and it
think
clashes.
I think the simplest way I can put it is I believe his belief of how much he can understand what somebody else is going through with a different perspective on the world is too much. He believes he can understand and relate with their opinion or their position more than they actually can. Or then, excuse me, he actually can. And that results in the issue that we have. I think
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Yeah,
I think he just needs to dial it down a bit.
exactly. Be a little more humble.
Yeah,
Right?
be a little bit more humble about it and be able to say, like, yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I mean, even if in theory he could know, I mean, he just, being able to admit that he doesn't at the moment, I think is pretty important.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right.
All right.
Well, cool. I was glad I got to talk with you.
Well, yeah, I'm glad I heard the stuff about what happened on that panel and stuff. I'll have to look into that because that sounds pretty wild.
Yeah, there's a part in there where I actually make a mistake because I was just kind of like caught up in what I was saying, and I said to him, like he said, "So it seems like you believe all the things I believe about trans people," and I said, "Yeah," and then moved on, and I shouldn't have said "yeah." So keep that
Mm-hmm.
in mind when you watch it. I was kind of caught up in thinking about
Yeah.
like, because I knew what was coming, and I was like, "How am I gonna say the rest of this on a stream with the whole bunch of people watching, like a few
Mm-hmm.
thousand people watching?" So, but yeah, I ended up saying it though.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I
yeah.
mean, that makes
Anyways,
sense.
yeah. So you take care.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
All
coming
right.
on. Appreciate it.
See ya.
All right, bye. All right, that's Zonia. Zonia dead. For anybody who's wondering who that was, that's someone that we watch
Hey,
from
Wicked
time to
Supreme
time
and
on
Zonia.
panels and stuff.
Thanks for visiting by and glad you are here. Just kidding. Call me Mr. President. I am doing both of your moms. Ooh, yeah.
We need to dial this. We need to dial this back a bit, okay?